The Russian Armed Forces Command encourages the self-destruction of Russian soldiers on the battlefield in case of injuries. Stormtroopers are prohibited from taking first aid kits with them in order to reduce their survivability. The wife of a Russian military man spoke frankly about this. The Russian woman is the wife of a serviceman of the 104th Airborne Assault Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces. She claims that her husband is sent into battle without medical supplies, so that if he is wounded, he will die immediately. I just spoke with Fyodor before that assault. They were told not to take first aid kits, like, no one will take you away, nobody will evacuate you from the battlefield anyway. They say, well, how is this possible? And the commander says, well, you can put one bullet aside for the last one. We don't need wounded. I don't know what kind of army this is, where the wounded are told to finish themselves off. They are emotional. What if there is another assault? We said goodbye just in case. The woman said. It should be noted that cases of self-zeroing of Russian soldiers on the battlefield have become widespread. A huge number of such incidents were recorded by Ukrainian forces using reconnaissance drones. The occupiers, realizing that no one will come to their aid, prefer to take their own lives. Plagued by a shortage of personnel due to heavy losses and desertion, the Russian armed forces spare no effort to replenish their ranks. Russian commanders are also in the habit of transitioning wounded soldiers back to active duty as soon as possible, often neglecting their physical treatment and recovery needs, not to mention their psychological trauma. Faced with acute personnel shortages, Russian commanders not only coerce mobilized personnel into signing contracts that cannot be terminated until the end of the war, but also put the wounded back into service, regardless of their injuries and degree of recovery. Most servicemen are sent back to the front line as soon as they are released from the hospital. This includes patients with shrapnel in their limbs, post-concussion syndrome, and even without fingers on one of their hands. In August 2023, the Military Medical Directorate of Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed that more than 97% of wounded military personnel recover and return to active duty. In reality, however, combatants are often denied the time they need for adequate recovery and are forced back into service through violence and threats if they attempt to refuse to return to the front line.
Russia insists on verifying Kiev's purity in discussions with the West on resolving the Ukrainian issue. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said this in an interview with the Kommersant newspaper. Verifying the principled purity of our Ukrainian neighbors is the main issue we insist on in our discussions with the West. They supposedly want to help the settlement process. All these peace plans drawn up by Macron and Starmer are built on the basis of retaining at least a piece of land and having a Nazi, openly Russophobic regime there, created to prepare for a new war against Russia. This was also the case with the Minsk agreements, Lavrov noted. He spoke about strike on Sumy. International humanitarian law categorically prohibits placing military facilities and weapons on the grounds under civilian sites. Since the earliest days of the crisis, and even earlier when the Minsk agreements were in effect, and we were hopeful that they would bring a peaceful solution to the problem, leaving Ukraine's territory whole minus Crimea, there were 1 million facts of artillery and air defense systems deployed in city quarters next to kindergartens. The internet was full of videos showing Ukrainian women yelling at the military, telling them to clear out from retail outlets and playgrounds, but they keep doing so to this day. We have facts about who was inside the building that was hit in Sumy. There was another get-together of Ukrainian military commanders with their Western colleagues who were there under the guise of mercenaries, or someone else. NATO military personnel are there and are directly in charge of the operations. Everyone is aware of that. The New York Times provided an account of the U.S. military personnel playing a key role in attacks on Russia from the very beginning. Without them, most long-range missiles would have never been fired, he added.
In 3 years of full-scale invasion, Vladimir Putin has spent $1 trillion to finance the war against Ukraine. This was stated by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in an interview with 60 Minutes on CBS News. 3 countries are already involved in this war, and others will be involved, or more troops from these countries will be involved if this war is not stopped. Interested parties are participating in this war today. The North Koreans, Chinese, and Iranians have started making money on this, and when the war continues and billions are spent, and Putin has already spent more than $1 trillion on this war, then these countries will not want to stop, Zelensky said. Let us recall that Putin signed the law on the federal budget for 2025 to 2027, according to which next year the government will increase spending under the National Defense item to a new record of 13.49 trillion rubles. Despite the significant financial cost of keeping the war going, Russian President Vladimir Putin is showing no signs of giving up. In one address, he said, "The Russian economy and management system turned out to be much stronger than the West believed." Neither Ukraine nor Russia will truly surrender certain war aims in a negotiation unless they literally have no choice. Cato Institute policy analyst Jordan Cohen told, "Surrender occurs usually when resources cannot meet the threshold experienced during a war. In that sense, for Ukraine, this could look like Western countries deciding to no longer provide as much military aid, if any at all," Cohen said. For Russia, I think that they have enough troops and weapons to continue fighting. But if at some point the Russian economy is weak enough that it cannot replenish war needs for its troops, that may lead it to try and attempt a negotiated settlement. Starting with the economic dimensions, Russia today had a gross domestic product, GDP, estimated at just over $2 trillion, while Italy's stands at $2.2 trillion. Ukraine's GDP is 1/10 the size of Russia's, at approximately $200 billion. The war has reduced Ukraine's GDP by about 20%, far more than Russia's, exacerbating a long-standing disparity. Russian per capita income is now twice that of Ukraine. Russia has experienced rising inflation and has redirected substantial resources toward arms production. However, large financial reserves accumulated through oil and gas exports have helped cushion the effects of Western sanctions. Meanwhile, new trade relations, including through business triangulations, have kept the Russian economy functioning. Rising energy prices resulting from the war have further bolstered the value of Russia's exports. It is estimated that if the Russian leader continues to spend large sums of money on the war in Ukraine, it will worsen the socio-economic situation in the country. This could lead to a popular uprising against Putin.